Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If the two of you would be so kind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
My name is Warg. I'm the lead singer and drummer for Heretical Sect.
And I'm Crypt. I'm the bass player for Heretical Sect. The other two guys didn't make it today, so it's just us two.
And how do you describe the music of Heretical Sect?
Well, that's an interesting question. I often like to think of it as an intersection between black metal, death metal, and doom metal. And maybe that's a little bit presumptuous to kind of claim all of those, but it's really hard to parse out where those lines start and end. I thought your discussion with Daniel Lake was really interesting in trying to detangle that relationship definition. But I feel like it has a black metal spirit to it. It has some of the punctuations of death metal and some of the vocalizations of death metal, and then some of the tempos of doom metal. What do you think, Hammer?
Yeah, I know a little bit less about the sort of the subgenres of metal. I think that in one sense it's kind of vaguely experimental, not in any kind of like extreme way, but I think we do come from different backgrounds musically, and so the music that we make when we collaborate is definitely sort of like it covers a lot of different areas in the metal world.
I think that's an interesting part of the band is that there wasn't too many preconceptions about how we had to fit into those molds. And so they kind of fall out or overlap or become experimental, and in the inclusiveness of everybody's ideas, because up to this point, all of the writing has been very collaborative and everybody has different backgrounds. I have a very limited skill set, and then Crypt Hammer studied music. So we're kind of like a completely different worlds as far as our abilities. And I'm lucky they include me.
Now, Crypt Hammer, when Warg says that you study music, does that mean you went to music school?
Yeah. I started playing music when I was a kid, and then I just kind of taught myself how to play guitar. And then about maybe 7 years ago, I just did like a community college associates thing for music theory. So it kind of felt like my music writing had reached a bit of a wall, and like I needed to dig into it a little bit. So it's been really interesting because I'd never played in a metal band before, to write metal music that's informed by theoretical theory, if that's not too redundant.
You know, I've spoken to a few people who went to places like Berkeley. I actually don't know that much of what a musical education means. Is it a lot of music theory and learning composition skills and things like that? Or is it a lot of time, essentially just refining your skills as a musician?
You can kind of choose it. I was doing theory instead of performance. And so the theory, it was pretty traditional. We did a lot of classical music and it was a lot of piano work, like viewing the relationship of music and movement and things that are just really common and happen all the time in rock music now. Because I feel like metal is one of the genres that's often actually influenced by classical music. And a lot of the people who play in metal bands are like extremely talented and studied people. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess I kind of find that exciting that metal is this place where there's like, you can really expand upon the songwriting and make things that are really like nuanced and interesting, but also like still very like punishing and dark and powerful at the same time.
Being on different ends of the spectrum, it's quite an asset to have those skills that Hammer does have, because it really pushes against my abilities and kind of barriers and boundaries of how I think about music. And I think what is interesting where these things intersect is there's that informed perspective, and then there's this like brutal side that has no form and is just bestial. So there's this like this intelligent and thoughtful aspect, but then there's the kind of primitive and very unfiltered things coexisting. And I don't think that happens in music very often. So it's
Yeah,
exciting,
I
collaboratively speaking.
I agree with that
Yeah.
100%. I think like, yeah, you definitely don't have to know music theory in order to write really good music. And yeah, a lot of metal is just like really creative and punishing. It's like also really simple and like not always executed very well. So it's kind of like sometimes can be really raw and still like just super fulfilling.
Now, would you say that the music that you write for Heretical Sect is informed by classical music or influenced by classical music?
Yeah, definitely. The stuff that I write, I compose a lot on the piano. And so I'll bring pieces that I've kind of fleshed out, like the harmonies and stuff on the piano and the progression. I'll bring those and then try and put those into a context of like really loud, grating, distorted music, which doesn't always carry over. Like sometimes you have to simplify things a little bit. But I know that the other guys probably don't feel that way. I think, I wasn't like really like born and bred in metal. So I'm sort of an outsider to the metal scene. And I think that the other guys in the band are just like steeped in it. And so they write very much influenced by, a lot of traditional and informed metal stuff.
But to your credit, we played with a couple other bass players before you, and you were way fucking heavier than those metal bass players that we played with. So there's something, chemistry and ideas. They're all there's so many intangible ingredients that go into how people create together, and those are not like what you want is to have that variety. Otherwise, you get a very strict blackened thrash band or something where everything has to conform, and there's no preconceptions like that. And the genre thing is a kind of weird trap because you want to relate to people and you want to explain, but you don't want to create a box that is kind of meaningless. So I love that about the collaborative aspect of the music writing thus far.
So, how did a classically trained musician who didn't listen to much metal end up joining with a guy who was very metal?
Well, from my end, I always wanted to play metal. I've been kind of getting into metal, I guess, over the last 10, 15 years or so. I kind of started with like, I heard Out the Gates and I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. And then from there, kind of like strayed into all sorts of, just different worlds that I never really was exposed to when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, I listened to like, to be honest, a lot of garbage music, like Bobby Brown and Paula Abdul and that kind of thing. Which
that is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
that's awesome.
It has a place in my heart. Like I will never put it down. But yeah, I started getting into, more like really heavy and aggressive music. And then I moved to Santa Fe and I started a job where Todd and I were working together. And Santa Fe is a pretty small town and the metal scene here is like really tightly knit. So a lot of the musicians play together and have been in a bunch of different bands together. So I think like when a new musician shows up, like people tend to get pretty excited. And that was really cool. That was just like a really good feeling. And then I started playing with Warg and Coffin Beast. And yeah, we just kind of threw some songs together. It was really fun. Like it was just really casual. It took off a lot more quickly than we expected it to, I think.
Now, did you guys already have a sense of what kind of music you wanted to make when you formed?
So it started as a two-piece, which me and the lead guitarist were sort of looking for what we wanted to do together because we had been in another band together. And I think we maybe played together for about a year. I was just trying to get back into drumming. And it was this sort of, because it was two people, it just sounded like bolt thrower kind of death metal. And that was where it started. And we really kind of I was getting my my skills back, and we were really ready to move it to that next realm of trying to write some interesting songs. And so we tried out a few people on bass, and once Hammer joined, we just had lots of chemistry, and he had lots of ideas and really, like I said, challenged me as a musician to kind of learn some new things, which has been great. And so our first demo, we tracked it live. We did it in 1 day or 1.5 days, 4 songs. Then I got to do the vocals. That all came together pretty quickly. And after releasing the demo, we wanted to expand. And so we had Demonic Haze as a fourth member and a second guitarist. And then our first album came together, kind of stretched out over a year, but it was only recorded in 4 days. We did 2 separate sessions that were each 2 days long. And there's been, of course, this unfortunate lag because of COVID. So it got released late, and then we've been a little held up as far as being practicing. But it's been, once we all got together, there's definitely a lot of chemistry, and I feel like there's a lot of momentum. And there's been a sort of unfortunate amount of kind of contraction because of the current situation, not being able to practice. But I am very hopeful we're at the end of this, getting very close, and we're going to have a lot of momentum into something special on the horizon. Because I don't know, I would love to hear what you think, Hammer. I think there's a big looking inward, and there's this kind of built up energy that I think will be explosive and have a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've been writing a little bit of music, independently. And so I think that we'll have material to work with as soon as we can see one another again. But I also just feel like when people can go to shows, they're going to go nuts. Like, people are going to be crazy for it. So I feel like on both ends, it's just going to be really exciting when it starts to happen again.
Oh, I never thought about that. That's going to be crazy.
We don't even have to play that well. People will just be so excited.
Fuck, that's like a standard for me. So that's perfect.
So we talked about this a little bit, but typically, how do your songs come together?
You want to take that one, Warg?
I'd be happy to. So there is definitely people bringing in riffs. There's jamming happening in the space, but we often together come up with suggestions. And I think that we're getting close to knowing what pieces should come together to make one of our songs. We usually try to have a lot of dynamics in regards to tempo and volume. But yeah, it has been very collaborative, and I think that's an asset. But usually someone knows where to go from where we're at. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think we all have a talent of hearing what's supposed to come next. I think that's one of the reasons that we just have a good time playing together, because we generally have a very similar idea. Or if we don't have a similar idea, we're all willing to go wherever the idea is headed, even if it's something that we've never done before, or is, kind of unexpected. And I think for that reason, the album has that sort of feel that's just it goes places that we didn't really it was kind of a surprise to all of us at certain points. And it'll be interesting to see what happens now, because I think that because of COVID and we've been writing stuff on our own, we're all going to bring stuff that's a lot more structured, which I think is going to be a good thing. I think it's going to make songs a little bit more cohesive and linear. But, that said, I'm sure we'll all do a little bit of tweaking of everybody else's ideas and make something that's collaborative.
Oh, and we do this thing that is really cool, and not in every song, but in a few songs. And that is, we pick a sequence of numbers, and let's say 5, 3, 1. And this is a really easy way for me to play weird time signatures or off interesting riffs. So it's taking it out of 4/4, we just pick a sequence of numbers and repeat a riff at those counts. And that is like the entry level, like for me playing music that's not in 4/4. And that has been really exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a John Cage kind of a thing. Like we'll just pick random numbers and then like throw some notes at them and then see what comes out on the other side, like this weird computer. And like a lot of the time it turns out pretty sick.
Oh, it's especially effective for what I would say are like doom parts.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious where this approach came from and why you chose to implement it.
I think it was your idea, Warg.
Well, I think that the first time we did it, it might have been my idea. I don't know. What made me think of it is I was listening to the Cardinal Worm, and they were talking about recording riffs and responding, and I had realized like that was really interesting. But like we've come up with our own strategies. I need to steal some other band strategies because there's so many out there. But yeah, it was just one of those things that came up like.
So for listeners at home, what Warg is talking about is I interviewed the band Cardinal Worm, and their strategy for writing songs is they'll play a riff tag game where the two main songwriters will trade a guitar back and forth and say, okay, now you come up with a riff. Okay, now you come up with the next riff. Okay, now you come up with the next riff. And they assemble their songs that way, which is interesting.
Yeah, the song that kicks off the album, I guess it's in 3. And that was the first time that I really had to wrap my mind around that. But I've really come to start to think in that way because I think it has a real aggressive movement to it that I would like to do more of.
Yeah, the threes have a real nice kind of applauding kind of stomp to them, almost like a gallop.
And threes and 6/8 time, that's maybe the most classical sounding time signature that metal bands use, right? Because it's that waltz Tchaikovsky kind of
it's real triumphant.
time signature.
It can be just like really epic, when executed well.